In the recent Hello Dave, I talked about how Anarchy factions are rapidly disappearing from Elite, and I wanted to go and dive into a little bit more details about why it's happening and why you should worry about it. Today's video is brought to you by Rich Wallet. Rich create modern compact wallets made from premium materials like titanium, carbon fiber, or aluminum. In fact, Rich is so confident in the product that they offer you a 45-day test drive with a full refund if you don't like it. But why would you like them? The wallets are easily half the size of a traditional wallet, but despite that, they can still hold up to 12 cards and has a money clip on the side. All the wallets also come with RFID blocking to prevent digital theft. So check out Rich Wallet on rich.com/D2EA and use offer code D2EA to get 10% off. So let me start by giving you a little bit of context here. May 19th this year, Odyssey launches on PC. Right after that, Anarchy factions across the bubble begin to see a rapid decrease in their influence across all their systems. After I mentioned this in Hello Dave, I've been talking to a number of Anarchy factions, and I promise not to mention any names here. One of them that I talked with, they had on the 24th, this is 5 days after, they were now in 3 active wars across their systems. By the 27th, they were up to 9 active wars. 5 months later now, they have been in a total of 57 wars with other factions. Now, if you're not familiar with BGS, this might not sound like a lot, but a similar non-Anarchy faction would probably expect to be involved in maybe a few wars a month. So in a 5-month period, you could maybe expect to have been involved in, let's say, 10 wars or something like that, unless you were specifically aiming for them yourself. But if you're not, that's probably like the accidental wars that happen here and there. So 57 is a significant increase. That's a tall order for a player faction to deal with that many conflicts. So why would you even worry about Anarchy factions? Well, Anarchy factions and thereby Anarchy systems and Anarchy settlements create a special type of gameplay where you can do things, you play by other rules that you do on other settlements and in other parts of the game. Anarchy settlements have, for instance, been one of the main sources of material income for Odyssey gameplay. All of you guys who've been unlocking engineers, I'm pretty sure you've been murdering people at Anarchy settlements at some point. I'm guilty myself. So if you want to get stuff like opinion polls, smear campaigns, but you need to unlock engineers, it is just one of the best and fastest way to do it. And you can kind of see where the problem is, that if Anarchy factions goes away, when or if Odyssey relaunches on console, we're gonna get a bunch of new players in, and because BGS is cross-platform, if all the Anarchy settlements are gone, they're gonna have a hard time. So if you guys think on PC that you had a hard grind, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. Just wait until the console launch if this doesn't get fixed beforehand. There are also more non-Odyssey related activities. For instance, hunting mining ships for diamonds is there, of course, and also it's a good place for pirates to go and hunt if they want to do that. So there are gameplays around Anarchy systems, and I absolutely think both for lore reasons and for gameplay reasons that Anarchy systems should be in Elite. They should not be all over the place, but there should definitely be some scattered around the bubble for those gameplay options. So what is causing all these problems? Well, you pretty much guessed it, I think, by now, and the fact that people are going to Anarchy settlements in order to farm materials, and that means they will most likely just be slaughtering people over and over again. And because it's an Anarchy settlement, they don't get a bounty, because it's Anarchy. You're allowed to do it. Well, they don't care if you do it. So you can just go in and kind of slaughter people over and over again. It makes it very easy to go around since nobody's around there to stop you. You can take the materials you need in quiet and peace, and when you're done, you can just super cruise out, come back, reset the base, do it all again. And when you do that, of course, that generates negative influence for that faction owning the settlement, making it more difficult for them to maintain system control, and more specifically, it's pushing them into civil unrest and lockdown. Now, I feel probably to give you a very quick crash course in Anarchy BTS, because it's slightly different. They play by different rules than the rest of us. If you're an Anarchy faction, you do not have access to bounties in the same way as a normal faction has, because obviously it's Anarchy, so you can't just go out and collect bounties. Now, bounties is the main way that you counter illegal activities in your system. So if you have a lot of illegal activities in the system, a lot of murders, for instance, of innocent civilians, your system is going to be pushed into either civil arrest or lockdown. Those two states are countered by bounties. Now, if you're an Anarchy faction, you don't have access to bounties, so those states are something that Anarchy factions are specifically vulnerable to and are extra hard to deal with. Well, If you have people farming bases over and over again, constantly killing the civilians, you're constantly pushing towards those civil unrest and their lockdown states, which, as we said, is difficult for those to deal with. Now, the problems doesn't stop there. I need to also give you a very quick crash course in the crime and punishment system. So basically in Elite, you can either get a fine or a bounty. Fine are for like smaller things, reckless flying, those kind of things. And if a police scan you with a fine, they're not going to bother much. They're going to say, go pay your fine, and they're going to let you on your way. However, if they scan you with a bounty, that means you're a wounded man. They're going to open fire. They're going to try to kill you. Other than that, you also have a notoriety system. The notoriety system means whenever you do anything illegal, you're accumulating these notoriety points. You can have anywhere between 0 and 10 notoriety points. When you have any amount of notoriety points, you cannot pay off your bounties at an interstellar factor. You need to wait for that notoriety to disappear. Then you can go to interstellar factor, pay off your bounties. Now, when Odyssey launched, doing illegal activities at settlement did not give you notoriety. It did give you a bounty, but you did not get notoriety. And that meant, yeah, sure, you got a bounty by going and murdering innocent civilian at non-Anarchy stations or settlements, but you could just go to the nearest interstellar factor, pay off your bounties, and you'll be good to go. However, after update 6, that was now enabled, and now you did get notoriety for killing people at non-Anarchy settlements, which, to be honest, makes a little bit more sense, but that just further meant that it would be driving people towards these settlements. Now, the whole notoriety system, I thought I just want to comment on it because it's a little annoying, because if you, I tested this out where I said, okay, I'm just going to do illegal missions, I don't care, I'm just going to run the missions and I'll see what happens. And after I did that for 2 nights, while the material collection was okay, I've also managed to get up to my 10 notoriety points. And that meant that in order to get rid of them, I had to basically wait. So notoriety points are burned off by every 2 hours in-game, not real-time. Every 2 hours you spend in-game, you lose 1 notoriety point. So what I did was that evening, after I reached my 10 notoriety points, is I didn't close the game. I went to bed, the game run, got up the next morning, went to work, come home from work, still had a few notoriety points, so I had dinner, watched some Netflix with my wife, and then came back a few hours later and my notoriety was gone. It's not a great gameplay loop, to be honest. Yeah, it's not wonderful. But now you can begin to see what the problem is. Dealing with the notoriety, dealing with the bounties is a bit of a pain. That pushes people towards these settlements, the Anarchy settlements, where people are going to be farming materials. This is causing the Anarchist factions to lose influence at an astonishing rate, losing systems, losing settlements. And that means that slowly they're also going to lose system control. As they lose system control, the system's going to be flipped over and they're going to become a non-Anarchy system. Depending on what faction takes over, it's going to change into a different state. But basically, it's going to go from being Anarchy to something else that's not an Anarchy system. So they're going to be disappearing. Same with the settlements. Whenever they get into a conflict or a war in the system, they have a chance to lose one of the settlements if they lose the war. So you can see where this problem is, that slowly, over time, both because a lot of the Anarchy factions, a lot of people have thrown in the towels, they're seeing very few numbers of players, but they're also being worked against by the full community. So it makes it almost impossible for them to maintain. Now I just want to show you what this has done to Anarchy factions with a little bit of numbers on it. What you see here on the left is just before Odyssey launched. This is some of the biggest Anarchy factions in the game at that time, and the P column, that is presence, that means how many systems they're in. The next, the C column, is how many of those systems they control, and the last C out there is controls assets, so that would be stations and would be surface settlements as well. If we look at what this is today, or at least at the time of this recording, you can see, first of all, the number of settlements has increased drastically, but that's of course because all these new settlements, Odyssey settlements, were added and they count in there. So those are some of those settlements that they now own. But notice also that only the 2 biggest factions have actually managed to grow over this period, which is quite impressive. But other than that, every other faction has been reduced in size, and the overall number of systems owned by Anarchy factions has also been dropping drastically. And the problem here, of course, is that as the number of Anarchy-owned settlements and systems are reduced, that means that the players that are farming for materials are going to get more and more focused on the systems that are still available. So even though some of the bigger factions has been able to actually hold their ground so far, else there become less and less other systems where people are going to farm. They're going to see an increased in number of activities in their system. So over time, that trend is probably going to change and begin to go the other way as people begin to zone in on the remaining systems, and they also get removed. So we've talked about what the problem is. We talked about a likely cause for this problem, but complaining about a problem without giving a constructive solution to it, well, that's called whining. So let's talk about what you can do. I think the best solution would be to go to the root cause of the problem, which of course is the constant farming. How do you stop people from farming it? Well, you give people a better source of materials. Doesn't mean you should nerf the materials you get from settlements, but buff others. Like, for instance, take a look at the missions. Make sure that they pay out more material so that it is more lucrative to do missions. Yeah, some of the missions will be illegal as well. Some of the missions will also target anarchy settlements, but they're also going to target non-anarchy settlements. Everybody's going to be targeted equally by these missions. And also it adds for more varied gameplay, since missions may sometimes ask you to go and steal a thing, other times it might be a combat mission, sometimes it might be like, there's a good variety of missions available, and a lot of the gameplay loops there is actually quite fun, and I've had a lot of fun running these missions. But the payout for data, it's okay, but for everything else, meh, it's not that great, to be honest. So I think a general buff of mission payout in terms of materials would be nice. And the other thing, of course, is to just make people farm for less materials by lowering the grind wall. The grind wall in Odyssey is through the roof. This has gone beyond the point where it's even a wall. It's like a Dyson sphere now. A grind Dyson sphere. And the easiest way, I think, to balance this out would just be something as simple as allowing players to change engineering modifications. Because right now, if I make a weapon or a suit, and I decide I want a specific engineering modification on it, and then after trying it, I figure out, you know what, that didn't actually work as well as I thought. I have to go back to square one, upgrade it through levels 1 to 5, and then put engineering on it again, so I'm basically back to square one. This is super annoying if you want to try to theory craft, because you're left with waiting for somebody else to go and test it for you, and then go and then make your decision based on what others are doing, instead of you being able to test for yourself. And the fact that we can't move with engineering modifications is also going to be a huge problem in the future, because it is inevitable that at some point there's going to be a balancing pass of either engineering or weapons. I don't know when it's going to come, but I will bet you at some point there's going to be a balancing pass on weapons. Right now, everybody's running around with their plasma shotguns. I don't expect that to last. Now, people invested tens of hours into collecting materials to build these weapons, and when the balancing pass comes, that thing could be nerfed to the ground and be completely useless and be nothing more than a doorstop. And that means that everybody's now back to square one. They can't even take them, even if they just change some of the engineering modifications to balance it out. If they need to change that out, they're back to square one. And that is a terrible game design. So I really, really hope we're going to be allowed to change those modifications without going all the way back to the start. It's just not good in the long run for the game. Some of the other solutions that I've seen you guys suggest on the Hello Dave where I mentioned this, and I really like a lot of them because there were a lot more lore-focused suggestions there. Could be something like, oh, I don't know, due to all the Thargoid attacks and the Marnalist attack on stations, Anarchy or all the bigger power play factions have decided to increase security in the bubble. This has been driving Anarchy factions out of the bubble. That would also give a lot of reasons why Anarchy factions are slowly disappearing in the bubble. And they're now setting up shop out the outer perimeter of the bubble. That would give a little dangerous area for explorers when they're going in and out of the bubble, where they have to go through this area of Anarchy space. But of course this is a temporary solution because, well, you could create a lot of Anarchy systems out there, but they would, of course, slowly, over time, disappear because of this mechanic that we've been talking about. Now, another solution that I actually really, really like is to make like a Elite Dangerous version of Tortuga. Like a pirate's safe haven. This could be like a mini bubble, a little bit like the Pleiades sector or what's going on out in the dark regions. Or something, you know, relatively close. Probably not as far as what's going on out in the California Nebula, but something relatively close where Anarchy factions would have a number of systems, and if the distance from the bubble out to when the pirate bubble or the Tortuga bubble begins is great enough, if there's a large enough gap of non-inhabited systems there, then you would prevent any non-Anarchy faction from actually expanding across that gap, and you could keep that as a safe haven where Anarchy factions could not be touched. So as you can see, there are a number of ways you can solve this, either with a technical solution or with a more lore-focused solution, but I would love to hear your guys' suggestion in the chat. If you have anything you feel like, hey, you have this really good suggestion, or if you feel this, I don't care about this at all, I would like to hear that as well. Put it in the comment section below. And while you are there, I would really appreciate if you would also consider subscribing to the channel for more Elite Dangerous content in the future. But that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in space.